Hi, I'm Joe Carass, and here's half a dozen great tips to keep you catching beautiful skimmers like this throughout the winter.
Strong like a tree, there's roots where I stand. Oh, I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon.
Having the correct ground bait mix is absolutely essential if you want to catch loads of skimmers and bream, and few combinations have caught as many fish as this little number here have caught this year. F1 Dark and Fatches from Sonubaits. Now for me, F1 Dark is the base. I try to use this in all of my mixes. I think skimmers absolutely love it, and it's just a great base ingredient to which I add other ingredients too. So what I like to do is actually measure these ingredients out with the help of these two tubs. So I've got like a 1.3 pint tub there and a 0.7 pint tub there, if you can see the difference in depth there. And for every one of them of F1 Dark I put in, I put one of them of Fatches in. For me, Fatches is a strong, potent fish meal ground bait, and I just need to calculate how much I'm putting in. I find that much perfect, and it gives me the ideal combination. So what I'm going to do, today, we're at Medlands today, we're going to hopefully catch a lot of fish. I'm going to be casting in and out regular, so I'm going to need a little bit of ground bait, but not loads. Doing it this way as well stops you wasting it, so it's very, very cost effective. So I'm going to put 2 of these in today. That smells beautiful. Lovely, that sort of trademark F1 aroma. So 2 of them goes in, and I'm going to put, with the help of my little shallow tray, 2 of those as well. Now that one's a totally different smell, really pungent fish meal aroma, lovely fine ground bait, that, an absolute winner. Let's put that in there. Beautiful, so 2 of them. Right, first thing, we must blend the dry ingredients together to spread that Fatches throughout the F1 Dark. Now that amount of dry ground bait is roughly about 1 kilo. Which once it takes on a bit of water, probably get about 1.5 kilos in volume. So loads and loads of bait there, plenty for a session with these little feeders that we're going to use today. So I'm just going to put in some lake water. I prefer to use lake water. I'll make it the first job I do when I get to the venue, get my water into my ground bait and let it absorb. These ground baits they're full of like crushed pellets, fish meals, all ingredients that absorb a lot of water. So give yourself and give your ground bait, you know, a couple of hours to absorb that water. You can do it the night before if you want to, but like I say, I like to use the lake water. So now what I'm looking for is to actually sort of saturate these ingredients. Like I say, they're gonna take on all of that lake water. Make sure you get right into the corners of the bucket, right into the nice even spread, and we're looking for a nice sort of damp texture. Now when you feeder fishing, the last thing you want is an absolute stodgy ground bait. You might use it like that throughout the day, but to start with I like quite a dry ground bait, as long as it's like properly wetted. So that'll do for now. We'll let that stand for half an hour, then we're going to pass it through a riddle, and I'll show you that process next. Okay, so it's been a good 30 minutes since we mixed the ground bait. I've set the rest of my tackle up, we're almost ready to go. The last job before I start fishing is always to riddle my ground bait. As you can see, the ground bait is dried up, it's taken on all that water. I could still use that, it still makes a ball, but I'm just going to tweak it a little bit, add a little bit more water before I riddle it. So let's just add another drizzle. Like I say, I don't want it too wet because we are feeder fishing today, and I can always add water to my mix later if I feel the need to, but for a start I like it relatively dry. Right, so that's perfect. What I'm going to do, just quickly buzz it through a 4mm riddle. One of this beauty, we'll get that through there. As you see, it absolutely glides through here. You can get the whole mix on there, no problem. A couple of rubs, it doesn't take long to do. And the end result of your ground bait is a much better consistency. So there we go, that's the finished ground bait. Absolute skimmer food perfection. Okay, so when we're skimmer fishing in the winter, obviously we need fine down tackle. That means the rods Superior SLs, unbelievable for this sort of skimmer fishing, super soft, absorb every lunge. However, there's something that I think people often overlook, and it comes from using ready rod bags, to be honest with you. People set the rods up at home, quite rightly so, put the tip in that they think's right, get to the venue, and it might not actually be the right tip on the day. So what I like to do, I carry loads of different tips with me, all different ratings on them. Generally, it's the lightest tip that I'll always go for, ½ ounce, 3/4 ounce maybe, but rarely do I go above sort of 3/4 ounce. It's usually the ½ ounce. Now, what you're looking for is a nice fast taper tip, as you can see there. That means all the action is towards the very tip. That means shy bites, you can see them, and it's so important. They'll stand up to that bit of toe as well, and you can still see the bites right at the end of the tip. Makes sort of bite identification really simple. But it doesn't take you 2 minutes to set your rods up, so my advice is don't set your rods up at home, do them on the bank, especially on feeder only events. You get loads of time to set up. Have a look at the water, look at the wind, look at the toe, and choose your tip to suit. I see so many anglers get it wrong in the rod bag, so just do it when you get to the bank. It doesn't take 2 minutes. Okay, so when we're looking to catch skimmers and bream in the winter, there's a couple of ways of targeting them. Like, one way is to sort of feed super negatively, hardly put any bait in at all, with tiny little feeders, and really sort of eke them out your swim, just trying to literally catch one at a time. Or alternatively, we can put a bit of bait in, sort of have a slow couple of hours, and then, you know, catch some fish later on. I like to combine the two. So today, for example, I'm fishing 30 metres and 15 metres. And at 30 metres, I'm just going to put one feeder full in, with hardly anything in it, just a scattering of bait, and I'm just going to fish that for 2 hours without even worrying about it. If I catch some fish, great. If I don't, I'm not too worried. However, on that 15 metre line, I've got like a 5-hole wire cage there. I'm going to put 8 feederfuls in. Plenty of pinkies, plenty of dead maggots. I'm just going to scatter some nice ground bait in, and I'm just going to leave that, like I say, for at least 2 hours. That way I'm getting the best of both worlds. If the fish don't want any bait, I've got that 30 metre line where I'm just going to keep ticking over, catching an odd fish. However, if they do want some bait later in the session, I've got a better bait out there that I can really exploit later in the session. Okay, so the biggest tool you have when feeder fishing is obviously the feeder itself. Now, when you're doing this sort of skimmer fishing in winter, you're almost sort of like teasing them onto the hook. You're putting just enough bait in to hold a few fish, draw one depth, obviously pull one down from the sort of mid layers of the water, pull it down to your hook bait and hopefully catch it. So tiny feeders are the order of the day. However, there's a couple of different types that I like to use. Firstly, I've got the wire cage feeder, just a little 3-hole jobby, nice and light, 15 grams, perfect for a lot of situations. The second feeder I have in the armoury is the little Diddy ICM in 12 or 20 gram. Put the swivel stem in it, and it becomes an absolute perfect little mini cage feeder for this sort of fishing. Both hold a similar amount of bait. The ICM probably a little bit less, but similar amounts, but they've got 2 different uses. Now, what I like to do is start on the wire cage, and the reason being is, if I show you, I can squeeze the bait in there, and because of the big holes, that's a light press before the bait spills out of the edges. So I know that that ground bait is probably going to come out as the feeders fall in, or certainly very quickly. I could even like jig it a little bit and make it explode out of the feeder. If you see, if I squeeze it too hard, the bait actually spills out the sides, so you can't actually get a decent squeeze on this. But for the initial part of the session, when I want to pull some fish into the peg, the wire cage is perfect because it just clouds up. However, when I start catching some fish and it's clear there's some fish in the swim, I'll switch to the ICM cage, which is a plastic cage. The reason being is, when I put the bait in there and give it one firm press and the bait is in there locked, I can squeeze it as hard as I want. It's not going to come spilling out the edges, and I know that feeder's getting to the bottom, the fish are going to home in, and there's very little bait there apart from my hook bait. So both feeders have got the uses. I'll start on the wire cage to pull some fish. As soon as there's some fish in my peg, ICM cage goes on and I catch loads. Right, okay, that's 2 minutes 30 into the cast. We're going to reel in now. And that is a super important aspect of winter skimmer fishing when you're trying to catch them on the feeder. You can do it 2 ways. You can leave your feeder in ages and ages and ages and almost bore the fish onto the hook. But if you're like me, really like to be active, having that stopwatch and reeling in sort of every 2 to 3 minutes and chucking out is absolutely crucial. Like I say, I keep repeating it, but I firmly believe that you're pulling the fish to the bottom and they're not really feeding in the winter. So with just that regular casting, just pulls the fish down to the bottom, and quite often your bite will come between 30 seconds and a minute, and I'm sure that's where a fish has heard that feeder go in, comes and has a look and follows it down, and your hook bait's there. So like the way I like to fish, rarely ever leave it in longer than sort of 2 minutes 30, certainly not longer than 3 minutes, in and out, keeping busy, and you feel like you're making something happen. As we all know, when match fishing, the last hour can be a crucial time. It can make or break your match. Often it's sort of said in the winter that the last hour is the best time of your match. However, I found something a little bit different when fishing for skimmers. When it's sort of December, January, February, when temperatures are at rock bottom, often the 4th hour is the one. That is the key catching spell rather than the 5th hour. So always bear that in mind. When you feed a positive line like we have done today, always try it in the 4th hour rather than the 5th hour. My reasoning being, it's before the temperatures have really dropped, those fish are having a little bit of a feed, drop on that positive line then, rather than leaving it till the last hour. Don't get me wrong, the last hour can be great, but give it a go with 2 hours left, because that is often the best time to catch these skimmers.
Try to catch me howling at the moon.